about the Auburn spring game. How many of you saw this yesterday? Bo Nix, name that, it's on everyone's radar for some reason or another. Most of the time it's critical. They didn't do a lot offensively yesterday. It's only their 14th practice. They structure their spring game to where they have the game, then they have one more practice, I think on Monday, which is the way I would do it, to be honest with you. But Brian Harsin and his staff are brand new there. As we've talked about throughout the duration of spring, the first order of business for them was doing a healthy inventory of the entire team, start at quarterback, figure out what we have from the neck down, skill set, from the neck up, mentally. How much do we have to deprogram? How far do we have to back it up in reverse before we can put it in drive and then start to go? I don't know if you picked up on this, and Harsin started talking about it a little bit in his postgame yesterday. There was a lot of that on display. See, I think maybe some of you looked and you just wanted to see completion percentage. How many throws does he make? Well, if you notice something else happening procedurally yesterday, they were throwing some stuff at Bo Nix, but what it was is they were testing him operationally. And I had someone text me afterwards and they said, "Did you pick up on this?" And I said, "I had it on a screen and I did notice one thing." What I noticed was they were putting him in a lot of situations where he handled the checks at the line of scrimmage. Now, to many of you who have a more modernized but typical offense that your team runs, you say, what's the big deal there? Well, if you watch Auburn football, Gus Malzahn's entire modus operandi is to take as much of the decision-making off the player as possible. He wants to make the changes. He wants his offensive staff to essentially think for the quarterback on the sidelines. And whether you buy into that or not, it's not the way they're going to do it anymore. It's not the way Brian Harsin wants to do it. It's not the way I would prefer to do it if I had my way for the way my team was going to operate. But there were a lot of adjustments. There were a lot of checks. And there were a lot of things that Bo Nix was being asked to do in a lot of ways for the first time at the line of scrimmage yesterday that didn't have a whole lot to do with his throwing motion or mechanics. Like that stuff, it was a mixed bag. But we'll see how that comes along when they have the benefit of hundreds of reps in the summer with 7-on-7, and then they have an entire fall camp. Wide receiver at Auburn is as weak a unit as I've seen in quite a while there. This is not a top 12 wide receiver room in the SEC. I know they had a couple of guys out. I know that. I had a lot of you text me that this morning. I think they got a long way to go. As I said with Miami's linebacker room, it is imperative that Auburn address their wide receiver room via the transfer portal. They just have to. I'm telling you, you can talk about Bo Nix all you want to. If they don't have better options and they don't have more options in that receiver room, it won't matter. There will not be a vertical element to speak of. No one will fear you when they step on the field defensively. They don't care what kind of tools your quarterback has because he has no one to throw it to. I know there's a lot of focus on the tight end position at Auburn right now, and that's great. A lot of it's by necessity. They got to take what they get. I know Brian Harsin probably walked in and he wished more than anything that he could overhaul 80% of that roster and just change it out. It's not that they're bad players. They're just not players that are perfectly fit for his scheme. Well, you can't do that. And so you got to settle for what you have. And right now, what they have is a very inside-out offense, which is not the worst thing in the world if you're playing 30 years ago. But these days, not so much. You want to be elite on the perimeter. They got a really good back. Tank Bigsby, let's talk about him. Absolutely. Tank Bigsby showed you everything yesterday that you want to see from him. Tank Bigsby is going to be a guy that you can depend on and you can lean on. I think Shaun Shivers, though, speaking of that running back room, is probably a guy that in terms of new staffs coming in benefits as much from his new staff as anyone does, because Shaun Shivers is a guy, I don't know why it is, it just seems to me his skill set matches this staff and this system a lot more than the system Malzahn was running. So that's good. That's good you got two there. I am not overly thrilled with where they are on the offensive line. See, this is a situation where they got a lot of experience. They've got a lot of returning this and that. I just don't think they're that good. Like, I think that's one unit that Harsin would love to overturn right now if he could. Again, good kids. I've been around a lot of those guys. I've covered Auburn. They put the work in, good work ethic. The ceiling on those guys is not to the level that you would need to have a potent enough offense to win games consistently in the SEC. Unless you got a star-studded defense. Which brings me over to the other side. Now, this is not something that was settled yesterday, and this is not something that's going to be settled for a while. Derek Mason is the most under-the-radar hire that any staff, I think, maybe made. Because I think there were a lot of headlines for someone like Bill O'Brien at Alabama. There weren't a ton of headlines really outside of Auburn for Derek Mason. Derek Mason, part A of what excites me about him is he's a really good defensive coach. He's probably done the most with any single unit on that team so far, granted through 14 practices, as anyone on that staff. So all's well so far on that front. But the thing about Derek Mason is, I think they could get huge bang for their buck in the recruiting game with him, because he's not known as an elite recruiter. But yet, how in the world would he have been? What were his previous stops? What was it, Stanford and Vanderbilt? Well, it doesn't matter. I could put some of the most elite recruiters in the world at those stops. They're not going to stand out to you. They're not landing top 10, 15 classes. So here's what could be in that package. What could be in that package is one of the better defensive coaches in the conference, and something you didn't know, maybe one of the better recruiters. We'll see. Time will tell on that. For their sake, he better be, and he better not be the only one on that staff, because this is an overhaul job. The personnel here, it's an overhaul job. Now, I know I'm selling them a little short, and it sounds like 4-8 is in the cards. They're better than that. They're a whole lot better than that. They're better than 500. But that's not where they want to float, because as we've talked about many times before, I think the 9-3, 10-2 expectation will be a little high down there right now. That's where they need to be. To justify moving on from the previous staff, that's where they need to be. And so after the 14th practice at Auburn, with a new staff in, drawing conclusions is tantamount to me asking you, do the clothes fit? Do the clothes I bought you, do they fit? And you're still trying to take them out of the box. And do they fit or not? That's what I want to know. Well, they're not out of the box yet. Is Auburn going to be good in 2021? I don't know. They're not even out of the box yet. What I do know is I think they need to make moves at receiver. Like, I wish they could make something happen on the offensive line. Again, I know that there is a lot of stock being put in the salvation aspect of the transfer portal. And in a lot of cases, I just think there's going to be a lot more heartbreak there than there is celebration. But who knows? Maybe the exception to the rule will be at Auburn.